Now, what do William Hague and Vladimir Putin have in common, apart from speaking English in a funny accent? Well, they both practice the martial art of judo. True, Mr. Hague used to find himself pinned to the floor by weedy Seb Coe, as opposed to one of Mr. Putin's black belt KGB killers. But the Foreign Secretary still claims he's up for a fight, well, sort of, describing the Ukraine as, quote, the single biggest crisis Europe has faced in the 21st century, and it will require all our diplomatic efforts, he says. So with East and West ready to grapple over the future of Ukraine, we sent journalist and author Douglas Murray to the very judo club that Will and Seb used to practice in. This is his take of the week.
Vladimir Putin has a black belt in judo. William Hague has a brown belt, so no prizes for guessing who'd win in a fight. Yet it's not the Russian president's physical strength that's been on display this week, but rather his will and ambition. In Putin, we see a leader apparently willing to do anything to restore what he sees as Russian influence. In Western leaders, we see a lot of grandstanding, but little apparent desire to follow through. Yet, of course, the truth is that Britain isn't really in this fight, but watching from the sidelines. We may have punched above our weight in Tony Blair's time, but the current government has further diminished our armed forces, eroded our soft power, and given up a moral foreign policy for something attracted more by commerce. The document photographed being carried into Downing Street this week said it all. The UK government would not curtail the financial arrangements of Vladimir Putin's friends in London because we want their money. And the government's so incompetent, it even let this fact be known publicly. This country risks becoming an irrelevance in the world. William Hague may have come to this judo club to train in the past, but nowadays it looks like it's all just talk. And often, not even that. Putin has surveyed the world and decided there's nobody around to counter his steely ambition. He seeks a wider sphere of Russian influence, and, uncontested, it looks like he'll get it.
And from the Buddha Kwai Martial Arts Club in Kensington to our own little martial arts club here in the heart of Westminster. Douglas Murray, welcome. Michael, you heard what Douglas had to say there. I put it to you that any tough sanctions against the Kremlin, economic ones, are going to hurt Europe as well, and that we just don't have the stomach for it, do we?
Absolutely. But I do think we're looking down the wrong end of the telescope. By comparison with the days of the Soviet Union, Russia has lost the Baltic states, all the Eastern European states. It is now in a condition where even its closest satellite, Ukraine, most of it wants to attach itself to Europe, to the European Union. It is having to invade what it regards as its own territory. It is entirely dependent on the price of oil, which is incredibly volatile. Its population is sinking. It's determined to hold on to Ukraine because it faces Muslim rebellions and Muslim terrorism, and it wants to maintain some sort of balance between the number of Slavs and the number of Muslims within the Russian Empire. I mean, this is actually a country which is breaking up and going down the pan. And actually,
breaking up, it's adding territory to itself all the time. It took two chunks of Georgia. It's just taken the Crimea, and the East Ukraine could be next.
No, I'm afraid your perspective is wrong. You look at
your timetable is wrong.
No, you look at what's happened over the last 20 years.
In the long run, it may be falling apart.
It is falling apart.
But in the moment, it's not.
And that is why he's acting.
At the moment, it's growing in size.
No, and that is why he's acting so desperately, because he's having to invade territory which is fundamentally a satellite of Russia.
Your leader, Diane, took a tougher line at PMQs than Mr. Cameron. What did you make of that?
Well, you can be quite tough in opposition when you're not really...
Yeah, it is. It is the luxury of opposition, isn't it?
But I just want to find out what Douglas wants to happen. Do you want us to send troops into the Ukraine?
Of course he doesn't.
No, I
well,
don't.
What do you want then?
Well, actually, if I can say so, Dan, it's your party that's actually done far better than the coalition government in recent years over the case of Russia. Take the Magnitsky bill, for instance, which the US passed, which prevents friends and allies of Vladimir Putin from being able to operate in America as freely as they do here. Now, as it happens, if I can just finish, as it happened, when Labour was in power, they often raised, in fact regularly raised, human rights abuses, things like the Litvinenko case, and in recent months, the Magnitsky case. Now, the problem is that the coalition government does not raise these things.
What do you want Her Majesty's
I
government
would like
to
Her
do?
Majesty's government to do what I just described, which is to raise issues like the Magnitsky case, like the case of friends and allies of Vladimir Putin that are able to operate in this country and are not able to operate in
Do you
America.
accept we can't intervene militarily?
I
of
accept we
course.
can't intervene militarily. I'm not suggesting
So
so.
what would you like to do, Diane?
Well, you know, you were rather mocking about limitations on visas and travel, but actually there are
I
300...
didn't mention visas of travel.
Well, what I was
Yeah,
saying...
you did. You said the girls can't come and shop in houses
Yeah.
or something.
There are actually 300,000 Russians in London, and I think that if there were restrictions on visas and travel, that would actually have some effect on them because they rely on being able to move backwards and forwards, and the UK is a
Well, it may have
stable
some
country.
effect on them. Why will it have any effect on Mr. Putin?
Well, indirectly it may have an effect on Putin, but the general point that as far as trade is concerned, Europe doesn't want to move because Europe is Russia's biggest trading partner. I don't dispute.
Well, the Germans they're key to any European Union response. They're just not up for it, Michael. They depend hugely on Russian oil and gas. They export more to Russia than anybody else. They're not going to risk that.
Absolutely. No, there's going to be no response of any consequence at all against Russia, and that's obvious by what people are saying. I mean, when David Cameron talks about consequences, since that word is so unspecific and repeated on a daily basis, it is perfectly clear that it is meaningless.
And if I could just pick up on that, also it's worth remembering that Vladimir Putin has seen David Cameron's pointlessness before, because in 2008, when Russia invaded Georgia, David Cameron, then of course leader of the opposition, seized the opportunity to go over to Georgia, to grandstand, to say how much he was on the side of the Georgian people. But this country did nothing, and he knew this country was going to do nothing, and David Cameron was going to do nothing.
But I still think the longer-term perspective is important. The West has had the most amazing victory over the old Soviet Union and over Russia. Russia's sphere of influence has been massively reduced in the world, and thank God Russia is not the threat that it used to be. Now, it is true that we're not able to control everything that Russia does over its closest satellite. That is true. But nonetheless, the situation is transformed. And I really think the way... I mean, it's not you, Andrew, that I'm getting at. I'm getting
Yes,
it...
he is.
No, I'm not. I'm getting it William Hague, I'm getting it John Kerry, I'm getting it President Obama, I'm getting it David Cameron, who go around making this whole thing look like the most momentous defeat, go around making themselves look impotent and making Putin look strong, when actually the reality is that the man is presiding over a collapsing state.
Well, you say that, but we
I
are
do.
where we are now.
Yeah.
What would you do? He's got Crimea. That's not going to go back. That's,
No, in
that's
fact,
with
I
Russia.
think Crimea will vote to join
What do
join
we do?
Russia.
What do we do, if anything? What do we do if he then moves in on East Ukraine?
There's almost nothing we can do. The United States has created a vacuum in foreign policy making. Since the man that you two supported so strongly has been elected to the presidency, it has absented itself from all foreign policy. It is in its most isolationist
just in
phase.
defence of David Cameron, he has tweeted a very nice photograph of him talking to Barack Obama on Twitter. Just wanted to say that.
Yes.
That's
And
a
of course
major
threatened
contribution to foreign
possibly keeping away from the Sochi Paralympics.
I mean, the key in this is Germany and Mrs. Merkel's relationship with Russia. And it looks, now that she's got a social democratic foreign minister, whose mentor is Gerhard Schroeder, who is on the board of a big subsidiary of Gazprom, the Germans call the shots on this, and they have their own foreign policy on this. And if we take, it's all very well, if we take sanctions against the oligarchs here, if they're friends of Putin's, you can be sure that he will start to take a chunk of the VW factory in Russia, which the Germans own. He'll start to take BP oil fields back from them. This man will retaliate. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't get into a fight, but let's not get into a fight without realizing what he will do.
Absolutely. I mean, America has paid some financial price for the Magnitsky Act. We would pay some financial price if we did something like that here.
And Germany would pay
but
very,
just,
very high price.
And just quickly to go back to the point that Michael made about the President of the United States. I mean, it is very striking. It was last March that the last tanks from America left Europe. They'd been in Europe for 69 years, and over Barack Obama's presidency, 10,000 US troops involved in 2 tank divisions left Europe. This is the first time in people's lifetimes that this has been the case. Putin has noticed that. Putin has seized an opportunity as a result of actions like that.
But may I also just say that there is a hollowness to some of the Western rhetoric. I mean, for a start, we're all meant to be...
grandstanding.
Well, no, but more than that. We're meant to be shocked by the violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, but not be shocked by the violation of sovereignty in Iraq or Libya or Afghanistan by the West. We're meant to pretend that Ukraine is a democratic country. I mean, actually, the democratically elected president was ousted 2 weeks ago by a mob in a square in Kiev, and he was the man that the foreign ministers of France and Germany and Poland had decided should stay in office until December and there should be elections.
Yes.
So, you know, when Putin says, but wait a minute, this is not democratic, this is not a legitimate government, I'm afraid he has a bit of a point. And the point is made for him by the foreign ministers who had contrived to keep Yanukovych there until December.
But here's the problem. He's taken 2 chunks out of Georgia. They still are now back with the Russians. He's taken the Crimea. That's now back with Russia. He could take the East Ukraine. He may take all of Ukraine at some stage. And there's very little we can do about it. What do we do if he then moves in on the Baltic states?
I don't think he has ambitions in the Baltic
How do you
states. I just think it's easy to get very hysterical about
But what
this.
if he did? What do we do?
We're not
the
sending
Baltic,
troops
I think
there.
the Baltic states are not anymore regarded as being the inner sphere of Russian influence in the way which I'm afraid Ukraine is. In other words, for everybody it's a different sort of line.
What we do is actually what America has started to do today, which is to start to send planes, extra backup to our NATO allies in Poland and the Baltic states, make them feel a bit more secure than they may be feeling tonight. That's a good step in the right direction, I'd say.
Because we need to let them know, and we need to let Mr. Putin know, that they will not be regarded the same as Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely. I
or
mean, you make
Georgia.
it clear. He may feel he has this sphere of influence, and we may have to accept, we may regret it, but we may have to accept that he feels he has that. However, it will have to be very clear where we think his sphere of influence undoubtedly ends.
Final point, Michael?
Final point. The reason Putin has had to invade Ukraine is the same reason that the Soviets had to invade Hungary and Czechoslovakia, and it is because they were losing control of those places. Let us remember that this is a symptom of Russians losing control.
We'll have to hope so.
Douglas Murray, thank you very much. Now it's late. Our stocks of Blue Nun are running low. They always seem to be running low, probably because we drink them all. And we need a little something to keep Diane awake and Michael up. Luckily for us, waiting in the wings, actor Rupert Everett is here to discuss our obsession with politics, sex and scandal. And remember, hard